This is an IT Broker Tech Deep Dive with Cato Networks. I'm Max Clark, and I'm joined with Austin Stewart and Abraham Gonzalez. And today we're talking about SASE, how Cato implements SASE, what I need to know about SASE, what you need to know about SASE, everything you didn't want to know about SASE, and hopefully all that in a short amount of time. Thanks for doing this with me, and welcome. Our friends at Gartner decided to brand this thing called SASE. Besides having a really fun name to say over and over again, SASE, 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 it encapsulates a lot of... Okay, look, the description of SASE is basically taking every point solution a company's buying related to security, SD-WAN, network, infrastructure, and merging it all together into one pile. And that immediately took and forced a lot of manufacturers and OEMs to go out and start acquiring technologies that they didn't have and maybe they didn't have in-house to fill out this SASE roadmap. Cato is a little unique in this world in the sense that you weren't a legacy manufacturer, you weren't a legacy firewall vendor, you weren't a legacy SD-WAN play. You came into the market already with this environment and this idea and this state, and actually before SASE was even dubbed. So, kick this off and just give me an overview of Cato and how Cato views the world that is now called SASE and what this actually means and how we make sense of all this.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. I'll show a couple slides here for everyone to see where it came from. And that's a great introduction to it, describing it as Cato wasn't a legacy manufacturer. Because what's funny about that, that's how Cato came to be. The inventors of Cato, the founders of Cato, Shlomo and Ger, both of these guys 30 years ago created the web application firewall and the actual firewall, the first commercial firewall 30 years ago. And then 20 years ago, the web application firewall. And they also helped Shlomo helped get Palo Alto off the ground. He was one of the first investors and gave them guidance. And over the years, they said, this doesn't work. I mean, if all you are is an equipment manufacturer and you have, like you mentioned earlier, all these different point solutions that don't connect together and aren't on the same platform, that it just doesn't work. And it doesn't work in 2023, hasn't worked for the past 5 years, really, with the cloud being what it is and the internet being what it is. So Cato started in 2015 with Shlomo and Ger building the foundation for 2 years. And we've been general availability to all of our customers since 2017. And since then, now we've gone from 2 guys who founded the company to 750 employees. We have a massive global footprint, thousands of Cato instances deployed and over 150 countries. So they didn't do this on a small scale. They went from 0 to 100 very fast in developing Cato. And one of their so 3 of their big deals when they started it was it has to be simple. It has to be operationally easy, and it has to be super effective. It has to provide a lot of value for the customers using it. And man, they've done that. It's pretty amazing. So, I mean, you can see on here, this is just a tiny bit about the customers that we have. So we have customers that are a one-site rural customer in Arkansas that can hardly get internet out in the mountains. And we have customers that have thousands of locations globally, and they're all using Cato. So it's a very scalable solution for any type of company and any size company, which is pretty cool. And this next piece goes to what you talked about, Max. I mean, it goes to, this is what the world, for a lot of customers still looks like today. A lot of point solutions. They have old MPLS, they have a separate SD-WAN provider, they have something for branch security, they have some remote worker solution, they have all these disparate pieces. And that's what Cato, that's why it came about, is to put all of those different solutions on one platform, converged, where everything talks together with a global backbone behind it all, and to take the complexity out of what is a super complex issue for enterprises is how do you secure it, but also how do you make it fast where all your users are getting all their apps and you're not having latency and they're able to upload CAD designs or they're able to get to their email and all the stuff that they're doing. And so that's what Cato did, just from a high level. That's who we are, exactly what you said.
The struggle that we run into when we start talking about architecting and blueprinting a design for an environment is if you have a traditional firewall, maybe that firewall claims to introduce SD-WAN functionality. And actually, we should probably talk about what SD-WAN functionality actually does for people, because, internet optimization, WAN acceleration, optimization, and MPLS replacement are very different functions of SD-WAN implemented differently by different vendors. So then you have, your firewall, and then you have your SD-WAN, and then if you, try to transition and go into some sort of overlaid secure web gateway product, fits on top of it, and all of a sudden you've created this stack where you've got three very distinctly different things in that stack, plus what you have to do for your remote users. The telcos and large MSPs try to solve this problem going back a decade by doing very large chassis-based firewalls in their POPs. And the problem that we ran into with that was, it would be pinned based on where the headquarter location was. So if you had an HQ in Los Angeles, you'd end up with a firewall instance on a chassis firewall in Los Angeles or in the LA region. And then you'd find out that you had development teams in Turkey that needed to connect to that were pinned from Turkey to Los Angeles back to EMEA assets. And that wasn't great as well. So let's spend a little bit of time. And talk about really the differences of what Cato is doing in that context, because these are the things I'm really curious about and I want to explore. And the idea of we do everything and it's magic is great, but what does that actually mean and how does this actually work?
That's funny, Rod. It does seem like magic. So I came from the world you just spoke of. So for my first 15 years in IT, I was at a couple massive MSP providers. And the world that we lived in was what you said. Hey, we have 30 different vendors. We would talk to the customer. What are you trying to achieve? What's your goal? What's your budget? And then on the back end, we would go, well, here's 6 vendors that accomplish protecting you, giving you a firewall. Here's some routers, mobile user, what was available through the years, right? We would try to control it for them on the back end and deliver something to them that seemed very seamless to them. We tried to make it seamless to them. Truly, it's not. They're putting in a ticket and there's a couple guys on the back end doing swivel chair and they're in 7 different portals and they're trying to put into action what your request was. And did they do it right? Was that accomplished? And were we able to do it in 3 days? The SLA is, 4 hours, but did we even really get it accomplished that week? Cato put everything in one portal. And when I first saw Cato a year and a half ago, to be honest, I didn't know who they were a year and a half ago. And I saw it and I went, how have I not heard about Cato? The architecture is exactly what we've been trying to do as an MSP for 15 years. And they've built it on one platform where they can actually, making one change and it going out to everyone, making it usable for an enterprise. Because I'm sure you, Max, it's the same as me and Abraham. Every customer we meet with, they don't have enough staff. It's hard to retain really good staff that learn what they're using. And so to expect a staff, I'm talking really large customers. Customers that have 40, 60 sites, they have a director of IT and a couple guys underneath them that are trying to support the entire enterprise, and you can't expect them to be able to run all these different solutions and all these different portals and the patches and updates that it takes. The nightmare that is incurred with all, it slows the business down. Their business can't reach their customers and grow at the scale that it needs to and make a lot of money like the business is there for because of the IT challenges. Shlomo and Gur, our founders, went, man, we have got to whoever makes this simple and makes it easy and makes it but super powerful and effective, they're going to own the IT landscape in several years. And kind of how you open, Max, all of our competitors that just had SD-WAN or that were a traditional firewall company, they're trying to acquire people and slam point solutions together, and they're trying to figure out how to create what Cato created from absolutely the ground up. And, they can't. I mean, they're still left with 3 portals, and they have this SASE story, but they still have 3 portals that a customer has to go into to manage everything. It's not converged. It doesn't look like this. It's better than this. It's better than what they had to work with 10 years ago, but it's not the future.
What is SASE, and what does Cato deliver? That's maybe probably the core of this whole conversation is, when Gartner says, okay, there's this thing called SASE, and a company says, okay, this makes sense to me, I want to go have this thing called SASE. What is SASE, and what are you delivering within that world?
So SASE has a lot of different definitions based on who you're talking to. So it is a marketing term, and it is very difficult to pin down one person. And I think, in my opinion, this is why Gartner hasn't made a magic quadrant of SASE yet. I mean, they're still figuring out, what components are we going to say are absolutely mandatory. But the components that you can't get away from, you have to have SD-WAN, you have to have security. And when you say security, we're not just talking a next-gen firewall. We're talking a security stack underneath it. Intrusion prevention, anti-malware, CASB to control applications, data loss prevention. You have to be able to do managed detect and response. And then you also have to have a managed services group that can help that customer out with it. And then you have to be able to support the remote worker. So the 3 things you have to have are SD-WAN, deep security stack, and you have to be able to support remote worker on a SASE platform. But then it starts getting a little bit sideways on who you talk to, because it's, do you really just have to have 1 portal? I mean, Cato just has 1 portal, but you go to competitors of ours and they're acquiring people. So you have to go into a portal for the SD-WAN and a portal. It may have 1 pane of glass, but they really have tie-ins to other things. So customers, I think, are really going to decide what SASE is and what's the most important to them. Customers are going to go, they're going to end up going, it has to be really simple and it has to be this, or, they'll decide with their dollars whether they're going to allow hardware vendor that their stock is completely reliant on them selling firewalls and them stacking stuff on it, or whether they're really going to go to a cloud platform like Cato, and that's going to be the SASE that customers choose.
Some companies are greenfield. They don't have infrastructure. Maybe they closed offices down because the timing worked with the pandemic, and now they're opening offices back up and they're going to redeploy infrastructure. And they've decided whatever we had that we put into storage, we're just going to depreciate and e-waste, and we're going to get new stuff, right? But that's not normal. That's not the usual company. The usual company is already invested in switches and access points and firewalls because they had to have them, and maybe routers and SD-WAN. There's a certain, I'm sure you deal with this a lot in this conversation, which is why I'm asking, when you look at that and you say, okay, if Cato's delivering SD-WAN and the firewall and the remote user access, you're displacing a lot of investment, both financially and operationally, in whatever's already there. And just by the nature of that conversation of saying, hey, you're going to get rid of what you've committed to and invested into, creates probably some resistance to this conversation. I mean, how does that conversation get navigated?
So some customers are really excited to get away from the disparate pieces that they have. They don't like working in that many portals. Some customers where there is the firewall SME, he has invested a lot of time in learning about Palo, Fortinet, Zscaler, whatever. He's wearing the t-shirt and he has the ball cap and he really likes it because he really knows it. Sometimes it's a leadership person going, we have to remove complexity. They're like, John, if you leave, who's going to be able to get in and do all the firewalls for us and patch and update everything? We have to look outside of this. And then a lot of times, me and Abraham, we work with a lot of IT leaders and even the network admins that are doing work and they see this, I am blown away every day sitting with customers and them going, wow, it does that? Oh, we can get rid of this too. Wow, y'all have a global backbone. The SD-WAN provider that we have right now, we just bounce around the internet, but y'all actually have a backbone that takes us across the world that's included in the price. Like you're not, there's not a, oh, that's a global add-on fee for this. So you really, when you talk to them and they truly have an open mind, like they really want to do well for their company, they just end up amazed by Cato. And I sit in meetings amazed that they're amazed. Like every time I go, wow, man, they love it.
Meraki is a fantastic product. They make great switches, access points, they have cameras, they have firewalls. The firewalls say they include SD-WAN. Really, that means that they do failover. They don't really, like SD-WAN is a loose terminology there, depending on how you actually look at it. And they acquired OpenDNS to give them their secure web gateway product and proxy. Now they're including DLP. But these are different consoles, right? The point of you manage your Meraki equipment in one interface and you manage your Umbrella infrastructure in another interface. Palo Alto has phenomenal firewalls. They don't sell switches. They don't sell access points. You've got different devices you're maintaining on your network in that situation. They have Prisma for global access, right? Zscaler doesn't have SD-WAN, firewall, on-premise anything. And, you have to have something else in place in order to talk to Zscaler. I mean, all these solutions, it's just like, look, I love Legos, but like to a certain degree, trying to make sense of like, what do you put at what level to do what with it? And you get into these conversations, you start whiteboarding, you're like, okay, well, we've got this thing, and this thing has to fit here, and it depends on this other thing that fits on, and you start kind of working backwards on it. You're like, what the heck are we doing here? And why do we need this stuff?
I tell you what's confusing for people, Max, is that it's so integrated and it's so converged, but it's so simple, but it's so powerful. Sometimes they don't believe it at first. They look at it and they think, they're like looking for the hidden camera, going, dude, like, is this real? Is this vaporware? You start talking about other customers and use cases and what they're doing with it, and they go, wow, man, this is real. This exists. I mean, they're like me watching their first Cato video a year and a half ago going, how did I not know about this? Like, where is this gold bin that it is? And it takes customers. It takes a lot of people, probably 3 or 4 meetings. I mean, if they're heavily invested in network equipment, routers, switches, all these point solutions, it takes them several meetings to wrap their head around, wow, all this is really in one place and this easy to use, but it's really this powerful. It takes a while to sink in.
Cato has and sells an SD-WAN appliance. It's part of your service. When you're talking about going into an existing infrastructure where people have stuff in place, are you immediately displacing the firewall and deploying just your own SD-WAN? Are clients running both at the same time? What does and doesn't your hardware do when a company deploys it? So if we've got an office, we've got multiple circuits, and I need reliable internet connection, I want to link in with Cato for your next gen firewall, cloud firewall, whatever marketing term, people want to actually use for this thing. But for your network layer and IPS, what is that? How do I tier through that deployment, and what are the phases?
Yeah. Hey, Abraham. I've talked. You want to jump in here? You've done so many deployments. So let me brag on Abraham. So before Abraham was on the engineering side at Cato, he was on the real engineering side in the pro services group, and he turned up thousands of instances of Cato for customers. So he's had an awesome history here the past several years of working with customers when they're deciding, man, are we going to totally rip out our firewalls first and just do this? And how does the deployment look like? So, man, go for it, Abraham.
Sure. So, very interesting question, Max. We can find a way to fit in. All right. And then the interesting pieces is a lot of time that model, like where basically we sit side by side with another solution provider there for the meantime. But a lot of time what we're seeing is the customer, they were expecting to move into completely to Cato in a year or two because they still have a contract or something. We've seen that changing fast. We've seen that basically changing within a few months when they start seeing the value that Cato brings in, the performance, the easy to manage and all of that stuff. They're like, you know what? let's just leave Cato here, forget about the other solution, to be honest. Like I've seen several customers with a year or 2 years left on different contract, for example, Meraki, and the plan was to use Meraki locally because Meraki do, right, it's an appliance that do local security. They're like, okay, we have double security. But when they actually saw the Cato product working and they saw the performance and now the what how Cato is operating, they're like, we don't need the Meraki, right? And here's the difference, right? These endpoint solutions or appliances solution, they do everything on the actual appliance, right? You put an appliance on the edge, the security is done at the edge, it's right there. In Cato, we have to change the mentality a little bit. The security, the IPS, the next-gen firewall, the secure web gateway, ZTNA, everything gets done on the cloud. When we push a change, when we do an update, things like that, it's all on the cloud. We don't have to worry about pushing a policy to the box getting disconnected, waiting for the box to get those policies right. And we don't do it that way, right? We do it looking at the cloud. The box is it's a very lightweight operating system. It actually takes less than a minute to boot up and be ready. When we update, when we patch those get automated, but the customer also have the option to do it on their own time. It takes like 40 seconds to patch and reboot and done. And obviously we offer high availability if the customer is interested in that. We run a very lightweight, obviously with the SD-WAN capabilities. We do the packet duplication. We can do up to 3 different circuits active, all of them. And then we also provide the QoS that the customer is looking for. And we also have capabilities to do VLAN routing, dynamic routing, and so on. But majority of the horsepower and the stuff that we known for years that the security box used to do, it's all done on the actual cloud.
Okay, so packet duplication is an interesting thing to talk about. So is this every packet's being duplicated across the different circuits, or you're doing selective packets, or this is configurable? I mean, how deep into the engine can we control these things?
Yeah. So our solution is per packet flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can pick which packet get duplicated. Obviously, the recommended is voice video, right? Because most of the time the packet duplication is done on the UDP applications, right? And then you can apply not only UDP, but you can also apply the priority or the QoS, right? What traffic will have priority over what, and then you need it to get duplicated, all right?
So appliance, piece of hardware, circuits plugged into it, you set up to 3, connected to your POP. So this is a GRE or IPsec or some other VPN tunnel to your POPs. Like, what does the selection of POP determination for the appliance work?
Yes. So the appliance, first time it reached the internet, it will build a DTLS tunnel. It's a 443, UDP 443, very, very light. So it will build that tunnel. Obviously, the boxes are registered to the account. The boxes will find the account, and the user will get a notification say, hey, there is a device ready to deploy it. That's it. So we basically encrypt those ISP, right? So all traffic coming from the LAN that hit the box, they will go out to our POP in an encrypted tunnel. And basically all the session, all the acknowledge gets done on the POP. What basically from the POP to our box, the only thing the traffic sees is just tunnels. That's why we can easily dynamically shift or basically aggregate up to 3 and use them as a one pipe because everything gets done on the POP.
So then configuration for deployment, a customer has to tell you their ISP details for you to pre-configure these boxes to ship them out with IP addresses and default gateways and whatever the subnet mask is and in that sort of network environment, yes?
Yes and no. You can easily connect the Cato sockets like it is a laptop or a workstation, right? You can just get the box and connect it to a LAN port, right? The Cato will get an IP, and obviously if you're allowing port 443 out, most of the time you are, right?
Probably.
Cato will dynamically, it will find the internet, it will reach out to the Cato Networks where we have what's called a steering server, where basically we can tell where we located, do a geo IP DNS stuff there and find our closest POP. And boom, we connected and the customer receives a notification. From that point, you can easily leave the Cato sockets behind another product, because obviously we're encrypting the other product, the other solution doesn't know anything about it. Or at that point, from the console, you can actually go into the device and change the IP to a static public IP if you like.
So now, if you're replacing a firewall, there's a couple other functions that the firewalls may or may not be doing. Like they're serving DHCP to the internal network, right? Maybe that's on the firewall, maybe that's on the switch infrastructure, maybe that's on a server inside the infrastructure. Do you replicate that, or this is if you were running DHCP on your server, on your firewall, move that to a different host before?
You can run DHCP DNS on Cato just fine, or relaying to a server if we need to.
Can you expand on the VLAN routing for me?
On the VLAN routing, yes, you can actually, on the Cato's LAN interfaces, you can create a static routing, right? Let's say you have a core switching where you trust the VLANs, right? You just do a peering with Cato Edge and your core and just tell Cato, hey, these are my networks, they are on the core, right? And then the core also knows about the networks they are behind Cato, which other branches, in case that you're doing static routing. If you want to do dynamic, we support BGP. The other option is VLANs obviously if you're looking into isolate because you don't trust those VLAN or compliances and things like that, then you create VLANs which in Cato are totally isolated, and then you can control them on the WAN firewall. Basically how those VLANs can talk to each other and how those VLANs can talk to other branches VLANs and others, and also the users that are remote.
Okay, so when you actually say and configure a VLAN and trunk it to your appliance off your network, you can then allow traffic between site to site, VLAN to VLAN across Cato's network, and you just say do this.
Correct. And all of that, it gets done from the same console. You never change that.
Okay. If you're replacing a firewall that's on premise that was doing this function, you have the firewall engines on site, right? You've got a really expensive firewall box, but the firewall engine's on site. So if you do this on Cato, how much of this is the socket doing, is the actual Cato appliance doing, and how much of this is going northbound up to your POP to actually make decisions? I mean, the question I'm asking is, if I've got a lot of traffic going between VLANs environment, it's a data center, it's an office to a data center, it's an office environment, but I want to have isolation between those VLANs, or I want to put policy on traffic between those VLANs. What do I have to know in terms of sizing, network links and accounting for latency and all that other good stuff?
So yes, you mentioned a good point, right? VLAN to VLAN, they get sent to the POP for inspection and visibility, right? And then look at the rules, what access they have, and then come back. So a lot of customers have sometimes concerns about the bandwidth, but a lot of time we're seeing that the actual concern, when they see during the testing, when they see the results, they're like, oh, okay, this is not what I thought, right? But yes, it's always good to think about, how much traffic you send from one VLAN to the other, and also the latency. But a lot of time, the latency, obviously, our recommendation is check with your application, database, whatever you have on site, what are the expected latency, right? Because yes, you have a 1 or 2 milliseconds when you're going locally from a security appliance, right, from the workstation VLAN to the server VLAN, 1 or 2 milliseconds, okay? If you have a DIA, right, on your office, a lot of time we're seeing 1 to 2 milliseconds from our box to our POP. That means going round trip is probably around 4 to 6 milliseconds. So that's the latency that we're basically adding for your VLAN to be protected to access the server side, right? Is that within the requirements for the application or database expected latency? A lot of time is yes. So basically the performance is not hurt.
Which of course is assuming that you still have applications on site, because a lot of people don't anymore, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Some of the time it's still a legacy app or something, but a lot of time when we go that route and then we do the test, the customer is comfortable with, right? But yes, it's always good to think about the sizing, and most of the time, right, because Cato provides SD-WAN, one of the advantage of SD-WAN is having 2 or 3 circuits, right? So because now you have a broadband, a DIA, a LTE or 5G, right, and you utilizing those, you can also say, look, I want to use this circuit for this type of traffic, this other circuit for this type of traffic, right? So you can actually split that if you like, or you can just use them as you want. So you have control over that, and you always can apply the QoS policies to make sure that traffic that is critical always have a first in line.
So what gets installed for remote users, and what do you do for companies' cloud instances? Because you're obviously not putting hardware at everybody's remote location, or you're not putting hardware in an AWS or Azure cloud.
Correct. For public clouds, yes, we do have a virtual instance. It's the same feel, same setup as the actual physical appliance, but obviously it lives on Azure and AWS. We also have options for IPsec, right? We have customers, they have a third-party provider, a third-party app, right, with the hosting company maintaining the hoster for you, but obviously you want that communication to be private. You can build an IPsec from the provider to our Cato POPs. So that way, you can still leverage the SASE solution, even with an IPsec, leverage security and visibility, and also improve the performance. You mentioned remote users. We do have a very lightweight client, right? And the Cato SDP. It gets installed on the users, and then the users can leverage single sign-on, right? If a lot of the customer in these days, they leverage Office 365 or Google Apps, Okta, One Login. We can integrate Cato with those solutions, right? And now the users has the same feel like when they're in the office. Same email, same password, same MFA.
So if a user has a Cato client installed on their device, and that's building a VPN tunnel, and then they go into an office, do they have to disable the VPN client? Or you don't want to have like a VPN inside of a VPN to connect to something.
Yeah, no. So we have a functionality where we detect they're in the office and the VPN client doesn't disconnect, it just switch to remote office. Okay, so we basically have the client known that they're on the socket, but we detect, like if they change to another internet, we right away can bring that tunnel up using the SDP automatically, right? Because we have a functionality that it's where the user can turn it on and off the VPN, and we also have the functionality of always on, where the user don't have any control.
So you can deploy a policy from the admin when you push out the client to force it to always be on, and the user cannot turn on.
Correct. Yeah, we can do it global, we can do it per user, we can do it per groups of users.
So deployment, you're talking about physical office locations, your SD-WAN box, remote users, installing an application, cloud instances, a virtual application, virtual instance, legacy hosting environments or legacy application sites, IPsec tunnel, everything feeds back into the Cato cloud. I'm just going to use Cato Cloud, but like the Cato infrastructure. Okay. Not like your POP list, but the actual Cato Cloud functionality. And when you say next generation firewall, what does that actually mean? I mean, that's a pretty broad marketing term in today's world.
So I have a pretty cool slide for you, Max. I think this'll bring some truth to we've been talking about a little here today, because it shows our security stack is truly a single pass. And this is a really cool delineator. So when you talk to Cato compared to equipment vendors out there that are trying to sell, like they're pushing hard their hardware, and then they have to put the security stack on top of it, and then you have to go to another web interface for another piece of it. Man, this is truth to me in a slide, because it's so cool. You see the firewall, secure web gateway, all of the security stack there is on a single pass. And all of them are talking to each other to contextualize the information and to provide security that our competitors can't do, because their platform isn't cross-contextualizing these different pieces of these different security solutions that are, whatever it's intrusion prevention, talking to the anti-malware to see, is this packet real? Is it not? Is there something wrong here? And is it contextualizing with the firewall and the CASB, the applications that they're using? I think this is an awesome litmus test of SASE. So going back to where we kind of started from at the first of the program, what's SASE? Dude, this is SASE. One platform, a single pass, your packet hits the Cato cloud. If you've purchased all these services from us, if you're using them all, man, that packet goes through all of these in one pass, which is awesome for latency. Like their business users are able to pass through their files, the applications, the pieces of information, and it's not hitting 4 different point solutions even if it's the same provider, even if it's like you mentioned, a Meraki or a Palo, it's not having to go in and out of different ingestion engines that they have. We have one engine. So, man, you can talk about this a little bit, but I think this is awesome. This is a real litmus test and some real truth about SASE and what a single platform provides.
I got a few questions. As I understand it, commonly, a company might start with a firewall, which includes the secure web gateway URL filtering and an IPS and anti-malware, or some variation of those things. The selection of these boxes is really what features have we enabled through licensing with Cato to say we want IPS or we don't want IPS right now. But when we want IPS, we can just say we want IPS. You're just enabling that functionality in your platform for them. There's no additional deployment requirements or infrastructure changes or software being deployed. It's just, oh, okay, check this box, configure the tool, and go to town.
Exactly.
So next question I have for you is when we talk about secure web gateway URL filtering, IPS, and like anti-malware, also technology terms that have been bastardized by most tech marketing company budgets and stuff to like shoehorn a lot of things in. And like going back 20 years, you had WebSense. And WebSense would build like classifications of a URL, right? Like, we know this is a sports site. We don't allow people to go to sports sites. You could say no sports. By the way, we did this to our salespeople in an office one year for March Madness. It was really funny. The problem with that, though, is in today's world, like this stuff changes so fast, right? So like, what is Cato actually doing from a threat intelligence and a reputation, and aggregation of data across your entire environment platform customers to actually start making these decisions? Like what are you doing behind the scenes? Because, you see these stories where it's like, oh, something got installed in an application, on a computer, it was dormant for a period of time, and it woke up on, Tuesday the 28th and reached out and talked to a domain name that hadn't been registered yet. And then command and control kicked off and like all this bad stuff that happens to you. And that thing, right, that command and control infrastructure has never been seen before, so nobody's filtering against it. If you're just using URL filtering and like basic, like this is good, this is bad, like you can go to Amazon, you can't go to other stuff, you don't see that stuff and you can't protect against it. So
yeah, that's proprietary information. We would have to kill you if we told you, Max. You're not allowed to. No, Abraham was just talking about this, I believe, like yesterday or the day before with a customer. They asked kind of that same question. So go for it, Abraham. The answer was awesome.
Yeah, so one of the unique features, right, because we receive feeds from basically where everybody receives feeds, right? We read the same, what's it called,
CVEs.
News, right? So we know that. Okay, what is our big difference is, and you mentioned before that, right? When you get into some competitors, they have SD-WAN appliances, and then you have to find security, and then you have to, different point solution. What happened with them is they don't know about each other. They don't know what's going on the network. They don't know what's going on the security. They don't know what's going on the CASB. Probably they have a URL filtering, a DNS security solution. When you have what we have, which basically what we call it is a shared context security of firewall, where basically all our next-gen firewall, secure web gateway, CASB, DLP, IPS, anti-malware, next-gen anti-malware, they have eyes over the packet, over the flow at the same time. That's why we call it single pass. And then another very, very important thing here is the TLS decryption, right? Because a lot of, on this new world, or, this new technology that we're changing here, that everything is going more and more digital, well, things are coming encrypted because of the security. Guess what? The attackers also encrypting because they want to hide their stuff, right? So TLS is very, very important, which we do recommend to turn on. So when you undecrypt the packet, now our solution all our solution, our complete security stack, have eyes over that packet. And instead of one of them making basically a decision of what they see, what they saw, or doing it on kind of step by step, all of them, they talk to each other and they make a decision like as a family. It's like in the neighborhood when you have somebody kind of malicious passing by. What happens if one person sees it, right? But what happens if everybody get together? It's like, hey, have you seen this car? Oh yeah, I've seen this movie. And they're like, oh, now we can make a decision as kind of like a unified decision, right? Based on what everybody's seen. So that way we can improve the overall performance, because instead of waiting, going into Euro filtering, application control, anti-malware, IPS, no, we can even stop it right on the first one. Say, look, this is malicious because this IP has a bad reputation. This file has a signature that's been modified that we see from here or there, right? And we collect so much data across customers, right? Across, or basically what we seen, what happened across the Cato networks. For example, Log4j. Why we were able to detect it in less than 24 hours? Because we seen Log4j a ton of customer accessing it every single day, every hour, right? So we see how it behaves normally. When we saw how it started behaving a little different, that's when we raised alerts right away. And we're like, oh, hold on, something is changing here. And this is all real time. We don't have to wait for the CVE to get, okay, here's the information. Let me find now the fix and deploy it. We were able to see the behavior. We were able to stop it and basically deploy to other customers. And they didn't have to do nothing about it. It was just all done for them, and that's one of the benefit of the advantage that we have against other solutions.
The craziest thing that I experience now talking with companies about security fits into kind of two categories. And the first one is we get into when we're evaluating and we're doing, we'll just use evaluating. When we're doing evaluating, one of the things I'm looking for is like, how mature is your organization? How big are you, and how much data do you have, right? And you find companies selling security, and it's like, well, we have 12 people in our SOC, and we're using whatever point solution that we've integrated on top of. And these are good tools, right? We're talking industry best of breed platforms, but they're relatively isolated to each other. And I take a step back from that and I say, well, security is not this like isolated thing anymore. You need to have a lot of data. And I was watching a briefing the other day from Cato. And one of the slides that came up was it was showing like growth of your network was really the point of the marketing slide. But at that point, I think the slide was something like 1.3 trillion flows a month worth of data through your network. And I'm sure the number is even higher now. So if you know what the number is, by all means, that's a lot of data to actually be able to evaluate. I mean, you think about like a firewall enabling UTM or DPI, like it only sees what it sees, but I'm trying to contextualize like what 1.3 trillion flows a month worth of data actually means in terms of network traffic. And the other thing that was interesting on this slide, it was top applications by use, like what destinations, of course, like Google and YouTube are huge and Amazon's huge and all these different things. But, it was TikTok actually sits here in our rankings for our global customers of like how much of our global traffic actually goes to TikTok. And that was also interesting to me too, because that kind of gets into your CASB functionality where, traditionally CASB is like, I want to restrict access to Salesforce from only our authenticated IP addresses, right? But you've include functionality in CASB, which will tell a network what applications you're going to, what sites you're going to, and then allow people to restrict. I mean, like, do you want your users going to TikTok on your corporate network or not? Right? Like, it's kind of where I go to immediately in my mind. Anyways, I can you expand on this for me? But like, really, like I'm a network nerd, so I want to talk about this. Like, over 1 trillion flows, like is a lot of data. Like, is every flow evaluated in real time? I mean, what are you doing with these flows? How are you correlating this? How much of this is specific to a unique customer? Like, I've got a business that talks to Nigeria because we've got an installation for water desalination in Nigeria. Like, is that something that you know about? And you could say, okay, that's normal for me or not normal for me? Or is it, like how deep does this go?
We look at all that data, right? So obviously each network for the customer are isolated, but we can read that malicious information, right, to basically help other customers and help the overall network in Cato Networks. So yeah, we do have a SOC, we do have a security research team that constantly looking at all of this, right? We have our artificial intelligence running, and we always sanitizing our security stack, our IPS solution, based on, because we see so much feed that we can actually tell, and that's why on our solution is very, very lower or false positive, because we keep sanitizing this. We keep keeping it clean to make sure that what the customer gets, it's accurate. It's not just, oh, we're just going to do everything and then later we figure out. No, Cato is basically figuring out all of that for you.
Look, I mean, from a network admin or security, firewall admin standpoint, the dirty secret for all of time is you configured the firewall, you configured your NAT rules, you had any external IP pointed to any internal service like your email server that you had to have. And then 99 out of 100 times or 999 out of 1,000 times, the rules said allow anything on the inside to go out. And there's no real policy enforcement for traffic egressing from your corporate office to the internet. And then maybe you got a policy directive at some point that said we have to block AOL Instant Messenger, we have to block TikTok, we have to block something, and then you have to figure out how to block it. Now, in that world, you don't really have a sophisticated granular blocking method. I mean, you can put in IP addresses by hand, but I think about this from experiences that I've had personally, where it's like, okay, we're going to allow 443 traffic from to the internet, right? Like, it's important that people get to websites, but there's no real overlay to say we have never talked to a website in the Bahamas before, ever in the history of our business, and know when that happens and do something about it. And is that functionality here that now we get and see? I mean, is Cato doing this for people automatically? Is this something that you're just alerting on? Is this something that I'm trying to understand how deep this goes, where if I'm a Cato customer and I've been on your platform for 2 years and all of a sudden boom, we're talking to some website in BVI, what kind of flags does that raise, or does that traffic even get there in the first place?
Yeah. So we do also have a functionality what's called suspicious activity, where you can easily set that up it's automatically set that up for you. I'm sorry, and you can receive alerts if you want to, right? Get an email about that suspicious activity, so you can kind of aware, for example, that right first time going to Bahamas, if you think that kind of suspicious. But we look since we mentioned about the shared context, we look at the whole packet, right? So we look, it's an IP to Bahamas, but then we look at who is the provider, right? If it's a file or anti-malware engine, it will scan it and we'll look at the signature. It will look at the behavior. If it's a URL, we're going to look at what type of URL, right? Because it's probably, example, google.com. So, and then probably Google has something hosted there. We're like, it looks good. Basically on all of this, it's the first time, but I don't see anything bad about this IP. I see actually the file's clean. The URL is actually good. Let's send it, let's send it over, right? That's how the whole shared context work and perform, right? Because they can see over everything. And not only one branch is doing this. This is, we're gathering other data from users, right? All the users connecting to your network, and then all the branches, because they go through the same engine, right? We have eyes. And not only that, but we also see data from the network side, right? That what I was explaining. Since when you have different point solution, it's hard for security to know about the network because they don't know how to talk to each other. On our network, everything talk to each other, so we can gather more data to make more accurate decisions about the traffic.
Now, what's not on this slide that you talked about earlier was MDR. And I'm really curious because MDR is not functionality that's usually included from an SWG product, right? You don't see this. Usually MDR comes into, a security overlay of somebody that's managing an EDR and a SIEM and performing SOC functions. So what is MDR in the Cato world, and what are you doing for MDR for customers?
Obviously, it's an add-on product where we can help you, right? You probably have a set of security engineers, but there is obviously to certain points that they can do, right? And sometimes you have one or two, or I don't know, maybe you have one security/network, so it's kind of hard to know everything. So we give you that another set of eyes, where basically is, since you're going to send all traffic over Cato, we're going to look at all of the data, and basically we're going to tell you what's going on. And maybe when you see that report, you're going to be like, hold on a second, I didn't know that all of this was happening. And basically we give you best practice and how you can approach that, how you can fix that stuff, right? And then we can include, meetings with the team, and basically how that gets done, and recommendation, how you can remediate. That's kind of like what is included on the MDR solution, right? A lot of time, you probably not aware, but you maybe have, for example, SMB 1, 2, and 3 open. But actually, nobody's using SMB 1 and 2, which has vulnerability, and you're like, oh, really? I can close it. Go ahead and close it, right? SSH 1 and version 2. You have both open, but the people that are doing SSH are only using 2, which is the actual good one, right? SSH 1, you can close it, right? And then you probably are open custom ports, and then for specific application or services. But guess what? When you do TCP UDP, the attackers can actually still tunneling in. So what we recommend is like, look, change these to a service that we have here. It's a service that we sign, Cato, and we look all the way to the layer 7. So we can actually have a much better understanding and visibility over that actual services.
What do companies do that still have on-premise applications? I mean, these are things that maybe need to be accessed by users that are not inside the organization, right? So I don't know, maybe something's crazy and they still have a mail server on site, or they have an FTP server on site. They're doing some sort of ETL. They've got a remote desktop server that they want generally available for some crazy reason that isn't just accessible to their own internal remote user. When Cato comes into play and you've got your SD-WAN that's tunneling to your is that still providing a mechanism for people to host applications at their offices, or if they had a data center, they could put their data center behind Cato as well?
Yes, they can. Yeah, we still provide a one-to-one net, and guess what? You are now basically exposing that web server from the Cato data center, the Cato POPs, right? So now the session gets done like what we're saying on the POP, and now if you have 2 or 3 circuits, we can leverage your 2 or 3 circuits to make sure your web server now has a better uptime, because everything is done on the POP level. So now you also apply security. You can also apply QoS. You can also apply, a TCP proxy if you need to, and so on. But if you have a circuit that is not operating well and you actually want to change it because of any reason, guess what? You can actually do that on the middle of the day without interrupting services. And that web server app doesn't get interrupted because the DNS, it's all done on the Cato public IP, right? So you don't need to change the DNS to another public IP. You don't have to deal with anymore with the ISP public IP spaces.
Okay, so and then your one-to-one NAT is also solving the issue around UCaaS and real-time services, because you're doing packet duplication if there's a SD-WAN in play, but then in addition, you're pinning that through a POP, so that way you don't have NAT boundary changes that you have to worry about and have voice calls.
And that's about voice, right? Because it's most of the time it's UDP, but guess what? We have other applications that we can actually accelerate and basically increase the performance, because we can find the optimal egress. And since we have a network that we control, that we manage, right, that we provide IP SLA over that, you can leverage our backbone from moving from long distance communication. For example, let's say your headquarters is in Dallas, right? And then your public application is hosted on Virginia, right? The provider, the whoever make the application is hosting that app. Instead of you going from the public internet from Dallas to Virginia, what you can do is on Cato, you can say, look, when these users or the entire network are going to my public application, A, B, and C, please egress on the Virginia and Ashburn data center, the Cato POP. What we're going to do is from that path, right, from that communication or route that we're going to take, we're going to leverage the Cato backbone. Okay, and each POP that we touch, we're going to do acknowledge. We're going to do a TCP proxy, and then we're going to accelerate the traffic. So from the standpoint of the destination, every time we touch a POP, it's we're lowering the latency and increasing the performance. So when we get all the way to the Ashburn POP, right, and let's say now we're going to egress to the public to reach that application, if for any reason the packet drops, we don't need to go back to the source in Dallas. No, we just go to the last POP that didn't acknowledge, and we retransmit from there.
I'm having flashbacks right now when you talk about TCP proxy latency and window sizing to Aspera and doing global accelerators around like calculating bandwidth delay product and trying to do window sizing to have applications actually perform over WAN links. Are you telling me that like a lot of that is already integrated into Cato's and your Cato POP architecture, where I don't have to, if I'm trying to transfer bulk data, between two continents, that this isn't like go out and figure out some appliance that can take and actually shove the stuff into UDP and, pipe it across a network link as fast as possible? And
It's just there.
And a big reason for that, Max, is, we provide a global backbone for our customers. And so we need that backbone to be as optimized as possible so everybody's traffic is flowing on it. So, it's a great benefit to our customers, but it's something we had to do knowing the increased usage of traffic across the world. We had to do that. Or, how many pipes do you have to put in between? Because we have redundant connections between globally every single POP, and they're all meshed. And so we had to do it to keep traffic flowing as good as possible, because we offer QoS across our backbone for video and voice applications for customers. And so we had to put these types of window sizing and TCP in there so that traffic flows and customers' video and voice works really well. So,
Max, do you mind if I can go step back and explain a little bit of our backbone? If it's okay? Okay. So you're gonna kind of understand why it's so important, right? The Cato infrastructure on the Cato SASE solution. So obviously, like we mentioned on the beginning, it's our Cato POPs are actual physical buildings, right? Physical data center, top tier data centers, and we just renting basically the space, right? It's our equipment, it's our software, it's our switches, it's stuff that we manage, and then we don't use their path or their internet provider. We pick our own provider, right? And we pick at least two, and those are most of the time or all the time we try to get those basically the top ISPs, and then we pick those IP transit where we can actually manipulate the routing tables. Right, we have access to that, so now we can pick the as less hubs as possible from one POP to the other POP, and then basically now we encapsulate that. Right, we use both links. We create that mesh between all of our POPs. So now our customers basically they run on top of that. All right, and another overlay, and basically that's how they find or we find the best path, the best route available for them from one destination to the other. This is where a lot of the other competition, they basically fail because they thought about SD-WAN and security, and now I can do SASE, okay? But okay, you can have a good security, you can have a pretty good SD-WAN, but what happened from one place to the other, right? If you don't have a good network, it's kind of like really hard to say like, yeah, I like the security, but I want my packet to make it to the other destination. I want my data to flow. That's when Cato, the founders, they thought about all of this. And they saw how kind of broken the whole internet routing was around the world, and they're like, how are we going to improve it, right? That's why when we design the architecture, is basically we use the last mile, right, from the branch, the site. We use the last mile to connect as quick as possible to our POP, which is the middle mile, which we have control. We manage it, and that's why we can provide an IP SLA of basically I think 4 or 5 nines, right? Nobody else can do that. When you go ask other solution, they're like, hey, but we have, you mentioned Cato, yeah, we're fully native on the cloud. They're like, oh, we haven't. We have the cloud. We are in Google, Azure, or AWS. Well, it's still a virtual appliance over there, right? And then you just applying policies and stuff like that. But can you offer me SLA on this? I'm like, no, because it's somebody else's network. They're managing. Cato, we have full control and visibility over that.
It's not just virtual appliances. You guys have Express Route and Direct Connect, and you can.
Yeah, if you have, obviously we understand that there's customer with needs of a huge amount of data they transfer over. So we do have direct access to the cross connect from all of these top tier data centers, right? And then we can send now the traffic basically privately over Cato POP to the provider. So instead of just, our way is to send it always to the internet, to the POP scan, and send it back in case that you have a huge amount of data. Obviously, cost can be a concern. So now we have the option of doing a cross connect. Basically from a site, a data center, we can peer, and now we can obviously send you to to wherever you go, and you can leverage that across different branches. Yeah. So talking about that, right? The infrastructure, why it's so important is because now, since we manage this and we have this logical firewall all around our POPs, that's where we can increase the performance, accelerate the performance, and do all of these things, right? If you think about an MPLS is just a link between two sites, right? There's nothing in between that is going to accelerate the traffic that's going to improve. That's why we, in a lot of cases, when we do POC, we beat MPLS because we accelerate the traffic every time. So especially when we go overseas, people is like, what is going on? Like, tell me what is happening. And it's amazing. It's amazing even when in some cases there's outages with big ISPs, but our Cato customer, they don't see an issue.
Anybody that's deployed MPLS at any scale understands that you need to have two different networks if you want to have redundancy. And then you get deeper, and MPLS is just a private circuit of some sort of encapsulation implemented on an ISP's backbone, right? A telco's backbone. So you're still flowing through the same routers in the same path, like 99% of the time. So yeah, I laugh about, but it makes things easy. Like for some, like there's lots of applications where it's nice just to have like a private network, and there's a reason why MPLS is still a $30 billion a year business. It's, it's, I'm not in the MPLS is dying or not. I think it's going to mutate into something else. So
exactly, and we agree, right? There is certain applications that they need to have the MPLS, right? But a lot of our customers, when they see actually, again, everything comes to what type of services or application they need to access, and when they look at it on Cato, it performs like equally as an MPLS, or even sometime or a lot of time even better. And if that is the case, perfect, right? Mm-hmm. It will work.
I'm thinking about this in the phrasing I'll use is like, what's the catch, right? Like nothing's perfect and nothing is as easy as people pretend. And, there's like a certain amount of like a natural disbelief that comes out of this, right? So Austin, maybe this is a good question for you, right? Which is, you mentioned previous life, selling other stuff and cobbling together all these different things and finding Cato. And I think I had a very similar experience, but like there is a catch here, but what's the catch? Like, are you guys like horrendously expensive or, like you can't deploy sockets because you don't have hardware? Like what is the catch here?
Yeah, it's funny. I thought the same thing when I was watching the engineering videos before I joined Cato, looking at how was it architected. I haven't heard of them. How have I not heard of them if it's this great and it does all this? And I have not found the catch yet. So global manufacturing wise, we have sockets the end of the year into next, like we have no supply chain issues. The pricing. So when we speak with customers, I don't lead with pricing. It becomes irrelevant when we speak with customers. At first, maybe they ask a couple questions about pricing, and once they hear everything it does, they get a little, what's the price? What is this going to be, like 2x what I'm paying today? And most of the time, we're saving them money on maintenance costs. A lot of the firewall vendors, the legacy equipment vendors, they make them pay for the entire, if they buy Palo or Fortinet, they're paying for the entire 3 years up front, the whole bulk of it, and they're having to finance it to do it. And when they see with Cato, I only have to pay year by year, or I can pay quarterly. Man, this is great, man. I haven't found a catch yet, Max. Not compared to our competitors, for sure not when it comes down to pricing with customers. Man, I haven't. There's been no customer I've worked with that's walked away from Cato because of cost. Man, not a single one of them has gone, oh yeah, we're not going to do Cato because y'all are more expensive. It's a great question. It just seems, I think that's why it takes customers several meetings with us and them asking questions like you're asking, like trying to poke holes in it. What's my east-west traffic? What's the remote worker? Is this really going to work? And, they ask enough questions to feel really solid about what it is. Maybe they call a reference or two from us and they go, yep, it really works. It's not vaporware.
I mean, if you've ever spent $50,000 on a pair of firewalls plus 20% support for support and maintenance over 3 years, right? So you're $60,000, $70,000 over 3 years into a firewall. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of money for one location, and it's a big site. There's a big cost, and you have a lot of soft costs. You have training costs, you have admin costs, you have people costs, you have cost. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. Have you had any customers deploy sockets at remote locations for like remote users instead of being just, hey, here's software that installs in a computer? We're going to give you this SD-WAN piece of hardware, and you just plug it into your ISP, and we'll manage it that way.
Yeah, we do have customers like that. A lot of time it's kind of more executive level sometime in IT. Like they have like a small office, stuff like that, but yes.
I'm trying to think like what else I want to talk to you guys about here and ask you. I'd like to get into a little bit more detail around in DLP functionality. I feel like we just kind of glossed over that a little bit. And I love these two acronyms because nobody really understands what they are, and nobody can really explain what they are ever, and everybody does it a little bit differently. A lot of this stems from intellectual property and data protection. How do we protect our intellectual property and data that we have? And whether that's just preventing access, have we secured a cloud vendor to a point where data cannot be accessed from the general internet in the first place? Like just completely lob off this, somebody leaked, credentials, and now somebody can access this thing from, out in the internet somewhere, right? I'm like waving over the distance out in the internet. And the other part of this that comes up a lot is like, if we have data that's really important, or we have customer data or PII, or, there's different things between compliances, right? We can talk about compliance and the PHI or PII, and we can talk about, you've got data from your customers on your platforms. How do you prevent that data from being removed or egressed? Can people access social security numbers in your system? And some environments actually implement and try to use DLP to solve these problems for them outside of their actual application. What are you using? What functionality are you giving with CASB and DLP? And what problems are you solving for your customers that they're actually using you to solve?
So let's start by the CASB and the DLP, right? CASB is just we go deeper into the application, okay? And for that reason, we do recommend enabling TLS inspection, because those URL, right? Those access are encrypted most of the time, especially if it's sensitive information. So we need to decrypt that. Cato sits on the middleman, and basically Cato opens the packet and now have full visibility, and now it can tell if somebody have access to, for example, OneDrive, SharePoint. Right? Let's start with that one. It's a business app. So we look at that, and now we can tell if the user is trying to download or an upload. And now you can see that somebody is downloading. You're like, but why they're downloading so much file, right? Which on Cato, you can raise an alert, or you can actually block that. Or you can create a group of users that have access to upload, and some other groups of users they can actually download. Okay, so you can go to a Facebook marketing. They can go post. These people can actually do chat, this other can do Facebook Live, and so on. So you can control that deep detail into each applications. Second, it's when basically you have DLP. Basically, DLP is complementing in the CASB, because now DLP looks at the actual data, right? It's CASB is looking at the application and what they're doing. DLP, it's looking, okay, they're doing upload, download, or posting, but what they are posting, what type of data. And that's where we look for critical information, social security numbers, and so on. And we can detect that based on type of files, PDF, Word, Excel, and so on. And then we can decide if that user is allowed or not. Okay, this is when it comes pretty handy, right? Because we know a lot of the software happening before the pandemic, right? But a lot of the users, the shadow IT, right? They're kind of like, I have 200-300 users out there, and I don't know anything about it, like what they're doing. And I'm like, and they're like, obviously everybody's like, yeah. And the C-level are concerned, because where is my data? It's in all of these workstation, personal computers. So this is when our ZTNA comes handy, obviously with the CASB and DLP, because as we mentioned before, we can apply the always on, and now you have always visibility on what is happening on that workstation. No matter where they're going, you always will have the visibility. So now you limit the expose of those public apps to the entire world to only Cato Networks.
ZTNA isn't a specific additional module. It's just something that's included in this CASB, sorry, in the Cato remote access solution.
Correct. Yeah, ZTNA is just limiting the access of that user. Correct.
So how granular, how far in terms of policies can you go with users when you start talking about authenticating? So like if I, what would be a good example? Like could I take my laptop and go to China and connect to, connect to my corporate resources, or could you define a geofence and say, this user has to be in these locations? I mean, what sort of policies and entitlements can we build with CTNA with Cato?
It's going with the user identity, right? Who is the user and what type of device they're using. You can do pastures on those devices, right? You can check if they have a certificate that is a corporate certificate. You can check if that device is being managed by an MDM solution. You can check if that device has an anti-malware and which one is it. You can check if that device has a firewall and what type of firewall is it, if it's on or off, and what version there, right? You can limit based on the country, where that device is, where they're connecting from, right? And if that device is a Windows, Mac, iOS, or an Android, right, or Linux. So you can set all of those on the rules, like I'm going to put myself, right? Abraham has this Windows laptop. Make sure they have all of these checks, so then I can access this type of application, right? So you can go pretty, really, really granular with this. And not only to the internet, but also to your private traffic, to your data center.
You guys need to talk about this more, because so many people that are out in the market pushing ZTNA are not. Little simple things like, do you have MDM running with a certificate present on the device in order to authenticate on this box to connect to this network and do something? It's incredible, like what that actually enables for you in terms of access policy and protection. Favorite question of mine lately that I've been asking a lot of people in the security world is, what do you implement for a company in what order? So if you were hired in as a CISO for a business and it had nothing, and you were looking at, okay, now we have to create security policy and increase posture. What do you do in order? And my personal belief of this is, of course, starting with strong identity and multi-factor authentication is like, just turn it on because you're already using a platform that supports it. So it's like identity and SSO is like foundational, all this. But at some point you get to a point, you get to a question, you start talking about, especially with remote users, are you licensing and deploying EDR or SWG? And at what order do you do these two things? And EDR is like a very popular next step up, right? Because it gives you a lot of visibility. But I think, I'm not knocking EDR. Everybody should have it. But I think of EDR as more of like it's more like a defensive reactionary thing. Like, what happened on this computer? And can we track what happened on it? And then can we revert what happened on it? And it's after the fact. Versus, when I think of a SWG, more of like an offensive measure. Like, if you don't get the virus on the computer, you don't need to have something to take the virus off the computer, almost in that fact. Now you should probably have like a really strong email security platform as well, because like everything comes from email. But what I've kind of been chewing on a little bit thinking about this is, modern network architecture, right? You have to have an SD-WAN. Like, you're crazy if you don't. You of course have a firewall. You have to. And is the SWG just become like foundational? Like, you don't even have to think about it in terms of the order of like, what are you deploying? Because you just end up getting it if you deploy Cato, because it's just here. And this isn't like the question isn't really well formed, but I'm thinking about this more along the lines of like, is the SWG just become table stakes and not really a point of conversation of like, at what point do we license and deploy this thing now? Because this is just foundational for our network.
You mentioned very, very important points there. Obviously, I kind of have a very similar a way how I started. Basically, it's MFA. Whenever you have MFA, the other thing is a single sign-on, right? Because now instead of users having their own password everywhere, and the tracking what those logins are, what type of data, right? Now you manage all your public application, all the private application through one login, right? So whenever that person, whatever happens, you just go one place, shut it down, right? That's it. MFA is obviously very, very important. And yes, a endpoint protection, I think is always good. But you mentioned very interesting and very important is what is actually happening on this day on the local computer. The only thing that is happening still are USB, right? Somebody, and that's one of the top reasons kind of I recommend that is because somebody come with infected USB, never know, right? Plug it in and now it's on the workstation. Um, but even that is very minimum that users are doing, right? Because now you have your Dropbox, Box, OneDrive, like all the data is there, and where is it? On the cloud, right? So next, having a good security is always good, right?
I have USB drives that I bought, sealed from a manufacturer, from a supply chain I trust, that have been in my possession their entire life cycle, that I will never plug into a computer ever again because I'm so paranoid, because I've seen all these things happen out of USB drives. It's like, I know where this thing has been the entire time that it came out of a sealed package, right? And it's completely fine. There's no reason why I can't plug this thing in, but it's just, I just can't do it anymore because it's just, I don't know. It's just like, guys, this is incredible. I mean, Austin, you said this earlier, and it was a similar experience for me when you start actually digging into, you know, the kind of things that you want. And we kind of glossed over this a little bit of just being able to say, hey, we're going to create one firewall policy, one, you know, and apply it to everybody everywhere, regardless of where they are. It doesn't matter if this is an office in LA versus an office in New York versus an office in London, or a remote user that's working from their home, you know, in Texas or wherever they happen to be. And being able to manage and have visibility across that in a single place. It's just, if you've ever done anything opposite to that, I don't think you really have to, it doesn't take a lot to really understand like why this is a really good idea, right? You know, just having everything going and flowing through a single location where you can control it, or not even control it, but just inspect it and be aware of it and track it and take action against it is such a powerful idea to think about. And coupling that with, you know, really this, what do you do about now a percentage of your users are always going to be remote. A percentage of your devices are always going to be remote. You know, applications are all over the place. What applications are you even using? And I get back to my earlier question. It's like, you know, to a certain degree, it sounds, you know, it seems too good to be true. But this really does feel like what life should be like for people that are managing networks and security infrastructure for their businesses at this point. And, you know, I'm very happy to have found Cato and be able to have these kind of conversations. Any last words? I'll give you the parting shot here.
I can add, and it's you ask a very good questions. It's about obviously the concerns that customer have is trusting, right? Trusting something, a new technology. Obviously, we've been here since 2015, and we've just been growing. And then one thing I can say is look at who are the founders, right? These are the founders that basically are pioneers on the security. You know, our founder, Shlomo Kramer, right? Checkpoint, Imperva, Capsula, first founders on Palo Alto. So if you think about it, you're like, okay, these people kind of should know security if you're concerned about security, right? And second is, you know, live examples. I've seen customers, right? Fortune 500s where they go with Cato, but still maintain MPLS and still maintain other things just to make sure, like, if it doesn't work, I have something in place, which it make completely sense because obviously you want a business to continue running, right? Something affected, but that's the whole point of this, right? To make sure you always have a good uptime. And what I seen is when I talk to them, it's like, yeah, I'm keeping my MPLS, this thing here for around a year or two. When we start deploying Cato and they start basically seeing how Cato perform, literally they're coming back to us like, I'm actually going to remove all of this within six months or less. Because obviously they get that like a, you know, like a comfy blanket, you know, like this in case this doesn't work, obviously because they don't, you're not 100% confident. But I seen it over and over, customers that still have another solution and how they like forget about the year left, let's go for Cato, forget about the MPLS, put the, you know, the removal notice, let's go with Cato, because they've seen it. They are now testing it and they see the value. They're like, yeah, this is no brainer. So that's something I want to add. Obviously, for the people there that still have concern about this new technology, I was kind of the same shoes, right? Because I'm coming from a big MSP. I used to do data centers config, network configuration, different type of firewall, huge firewall migrations. So it took me a little bit to understand the technology, the concept of it, and why we're doing it. But when you think about it, when you give it a chance, you're going to see the value. You're going to see like, wow, this is actually, it is the future. It is where we're going, right? So it's pretty amazing. It's pretty fun. And it's a technology that obviously we'll love customers to give it a shot because it works. And thank you, Max, for your time and the opportunity.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much for this.